Welcome to Dreamtale Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is Welcome to Hotel Chaos. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly. 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle 528 Hz melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. Welcome to Hotel Chaos begins now. And when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. Welcome to Hotel Chaos. Lucy Martinez had always thought that working at her family's small seaside hotel would be a peaceful summer job. The Seabreeze Inn sat on a quiet cliff overlooking Brighton Bay, with 12 cozy rooms and a reputation for being the most relaxing place on the coast. What Lucy hadn't expected was that relaxing apparently meant completely unpredictable in the hotel business. It was a Tuesday morning in July when everything started to go wonderfully wrong. Lucy was behind the reception desk, trying to balance the guest register while eating a piece of toast, when the first disaster of the day walked through the front door. "Excuse me, young lady," called a woman in an enormous purple hat decorated with fake tropical birds. "I am Mrs. Gertrude Pumpernickel, and I have reserved your finest suite for my darling precious." Lucy looked down at the reservation book, then back up at Mrs. Pumpernickel, who appeared to be traveling alone. "Of course, Mrs. Pumpernickel. Will your companion be joining you shortly?" "Oh, Precious is right here." Mrs. Pumpernickel reached into an oversized handbag and pulled out what Lucy initially thought was a very small, very hairy baby. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be the most pampered poodle she had ever seen, complete with painted toenails and a tiny diamond tiara. "This is a dog," Lucy said slowly, as if confirming this fact to herself. "Precious is not just any dog," Mrs. Pumpernickel huffed indignantly. "She is a championship poodle with very specific dietary requirements. I trust you can accommodate her needs. She only eats organic salmon served on bone china, and she requires her bed to be turned down with fresh rose petals every evening." Lucy blinked several times. Her father, who owned the hotel, had mentioned that some guests might have special requests, but this seemed to fall into an entirely different category. "We'll do our best to make Precious comfortable." Just as Lucy was processing this information, a tall man in a safari outfit burst through the door, carrying what appeared to be professional photography equipment and looking around wildly. "Has anyone seen a rare blue-crested warbler?" he demanded, setting down his cameras with a loud clatter. "I've been tracking one for 3 days. And my sources tell me it was spotted near this hotel." "I'm sorry, mister," Lucy began. "Featherworth, Professor Theodore Featherworth, world-renowned bird photographer." He pulled out a business card that was covered in pictures of various birds. "I need a room immediately, and it must face the eastern gardens where the warbler was last seen. Also, I'll need to set up my equipment on the roof at dawn every morning. You don't mind if I make a few bird calls to attract my subject, do you? They're quite loud, but absolutely necessary for my research." Before Lucy could respond, Mrs. Pumpernickel's poodle began barking excitedly at Professor Featherworth, who immediately started making what he claimed were calming warbler sounds, but which sounded more like a broken bicycle horn mixed with a dying seagull. "Precious doesn't like loud noises," Mrs. Pumpernickel declared, scooping up her dog protectively. "You'll have to control your whatever that sound is. Madam, these are scientifically accurate bird vocalizations." Professor Featherworth replied indignantly. "I cannot compromise my research for a mere pet." "Mere pet?" Mrs. Pumpernickel's face turned as purple as her hat. "I have you know that Precious has won 17 beauty contests." Lucy quickly stepped between them, holding up her hands. "Let's all just calm down, Professor Featherworth. We can certainly give you a room facing the gardens. And Mrs. Pumpernickel, I'm sure Precious will love our quiet environment." She was just beginning to think she had the situation under control when the third guest of the morning arrived. This time, it was a young woman about Lucy's age, dragging an enormous suitcase and looking completely frazzled. "Hi, I'm Emma Butterworth," the newcomer announced breathlessly. "I'm here for my cousin's wedding this weekend, and I desperately need your help. The thing is, I may have accidentally told my entire family that I have a successful boyfriend named Brad, who's a doctor, and they're all expecting to meet him at the wedding. But Brad doesn't actually exist because I made him up 6 months ago to get them to stop asking me why I'm still single." Lucy stared at Emma for a moment. "So, you need a room?" "I need a miracle," Emma exclaimed. "I was hoping maybe one of your other guests might be willing to pretend to be my boyfriend for the weekend. I'll pay extra. I'm desperate." At this point, Professor Featherworth, who had been eavesdropping while setting up a tripod near the window, cleared his throat. "I couldn't help but overhear. As it happens, I am technically a doctor of ornithology from Cambridge University, and my research here might benefit from some local connections." Emma's eyes lit up. "Really? You do that? Well, I suppose it would give me more time to study the local bird population," he mused. "But I should warn you, I tend to get rather excited about birds. Sometimes I identify species out loud at inappropriate moments." "That's perfect," Emma clapped her hands together. "My family will think it's charming. We can say you're passionate about your work." Mrs. Pumpernickel, who had been watching this exchange with growing alarm, suddenly spoke up. "Young man, if you're going to be gallivanting around at weddings, you absolutely cannot continue making those dreadful noises. Precious has very sensitive ears." "But my research requires," Professor Featherworth began. "No buts," Mrs. Pumpernickel declared. "Either you keep quiet, or Precious and I will be forced to find alternative accommodations." Lucy could feel a headache building behind her eyes. It wasn't even 10 o'clock in the morning, and she already had a poodle with dining preferences, a bird photographer who made strange noises, and a woman who needed a fake boyfriend for a wedding. She glanced at the reception desk phone, wondering if it was too early to call her father for backup. That's when the phone rang. "Seabreeze Inn, this is Lucy," she answered, trying to sound professional despite the chaos around her. "Lucy, thank goodness!" It was her father's voice, but he sounded unusually panicked. "I'm stuck in traffic, about an hour away, and I just got a call from our most important guest. Mr. Harrison Goldwater, the famous food critic, is arriving this afternoon for an unannounced review of our restaurant." Lucy's stomach dropped. Their restaurant. Pumpernickel, Mrs. Unusually panicked. It was her father's voice, but he sounded unusually panicked. "I'm stuck in traffic, about an hour away, and I just got a call from our most important guest, Mr. Harrison Goldwater," consisted of her mother making continental breakfast and the occasional sandwich for guests. "Dad, we don't really have a restaurant to review." "I know that. You know that. But apparently, Mr. Goldwater thinks we do. He's been told we serve exquisite coastal cuisine in an intimate dining atmosphere. Lucy, if he gives us a bad review, it could ruin our reputation." "But what am I supposed to do?" Lucy whispered into the phone, glancing around at her growing collection of problematic guests. "I don't know. Figure something out. Your mother is at her book club, and I'm completely stuck in this traffic jam. You're going to have to handle this on your own." The line went dead, leaving Lucy staring at the phone in disbelief. She looked around the lobby, where Mrs. Pumpernickel was trying to teach Precious to sit pretty on one of the antique chairs. Professor Featherworth was making detailed notes about what he claimed was a fascinating sparrow outside the window, and Emma was practicing introducing her fake boyfriend to imaginary relatives. Lucy took a deep breath and tried to think logically. She needed to create a restaurant menu, convince someone to cook food she wasn't sure they had, and somehow keep her current guests from driving each other completely insane. All before a famous food critic arrived to review a restaurant that didn't exist. "Right," she said aloud, causing all three guests to look at her. "I need everyone's help with a small situation." Emma, Professor Featherworth, and Mrs. Pumpernickel all stared at her expectantly. "Here's the thing," Lucy continued, figuring honesty might be her best policy. "We have a famous food critic coming this afternoon who thinks we have a fancy restaurant. We don't. But if he writes a bad review, my family could lose the hotel. So I need to create a restaurant in about 4 hours." There was a moment of silence, during which Precious yapped once, and Professor Featherworth made what might have been a mourning dove sound. Then Emma stepped forward with a determined expression. "I used to work in catering before I got my current job. I could help with the cooking if you have ingredients." "And I," announced Mrs. Pumpernickel grandly, "studied hospitality management before I married Mr. Pumpernickel. I know exactly how a proper dining establishment should be run." Professor Featherworth adjusted his safari hat thoughtfully. "Well, I suppose if we're all working together, I could provide some ambiance. Many fine restaurants feature naturalistic soundscapes. Perhaps some gentle bird calls would create an authentic coastal atmosphere. Lucy looked around at this unlikely team of volunteers and felt a spark of hope. It was completely insane, but it might just work. "All right," she said, moving around the reception desk. "Mrs. Pumpernickel, you're in charge of setting up the dining room and training Precious to be our mascot. Emma, let's see what we have in the kitchen. And Professor Featherworth, please call me Theo when I'm not in research mode," he said with a smile. "Theo, you're our nature soundscape specialist. But please, try to keep the bird calls subtle. We want atmosphere, not a nature documentary." Mrs. Pumpernickel clapped her hands together decisively. "Precious and I will transform that dreary breakfast room into an elegant dining space. Come along, darling," she said to her poodle. "We have work to do." As the unlikely team scattered to their various tasks, Lucy allowed herself a small smile. This was either going to be the most memorable day in Seabreeze Inn's history, or the day they closed forever. Either way, it certainly wasn't going to be boring. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Emma proved to be remarkably skilled in the kitchen, managing to create what she called rustic coastal cuisine from the limited ingredients they had available. She made a seafood chowder using canned clams and vegetables from the garden, prepared fresh bread rolls from a basic recipe, and even created an impressive-looking salad using flowers from the hotel's garden that she swore were edible. Meanwhile, Mrs. Pumpernickel had completely transformed the breakfast room. She had rearranged the furniture to create intimate seating areas, found proper tablecloths and candles from somewhere in the hotel's storage rooms, and somehow convinced Precious to sit elegantly by the window as what she called our distinguished greeter. Theo had stationed himself strategically around the dining area with his recording equipment, playing what he assured Lucy were extremely sophisticated and subtle recordings of local seabirds. To Lucy's surprise, the gentle sounds of gulls and terns actually did create a pleasant coastal atmosphere. As the afternoon wore on, more guests arrived at the hotel. There was Mr. and Mrs. Chen, an elderly couple celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, who were delighted to discover that the hotel now apparently had a restaurant. They immediately made a reservation for dinner and began telling other guests about the charming new dining experience. Then there was Jake Morrison, a travel blogger who had come to write about quiet coastal getaways. When he heard about the restaurant from the Chens, he asked if he could review it for his blog. Lucy's panic returned full force until Emma reminded her that any publicity might actually help if they could pull off the evening successfully. At exactly 5 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up outside the hotel. Lucy watched through the window as a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by a woman with a notepad who was obviously his assistant. "That's him," Lucy whispered to her assembled team. "Harrison Goldwater." Mrs. Pumpernickel immediately straightened her purple hat and picked up Precious. "Places, everyone. Remember, We are a sophisticated coastal dining establishment with a proud tradition of excellence. Emma wiped her hands on her apron and nodded nervously. The food is ready. I just hope he likes experimental coastal cuisine. Theo adjusted his recording equipment one last time. The soundscape is set to romantic seaside evening. I've got everything from gentle wave sounds to the occasional dignified pelican call. Lucy smoothed down her hair and walked to the front desk, trying to look like she ran elegant restaurants every day. Good evening, Mr. Goldwater. Welcome to the Seabreeze Inn. Harrison Goldwater was a tall, thin man with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the lobby immediately. Miss Martinez, I presume? I understand you have a restaurant that's been creating quite a buzz in certain culinary circles. Well, we prefer to think of our dining experience as intimate and authentic, Lucy replied, hoping she sounded confident rather than terrified. Excellent. I do appreciate authenticity in coastal dining. I trust you can accommodate my assistant and myself this evening? I'm particularly interested in your signature dishes and any local specialties you might offer. Of course, Lucy said, leading them toward the dining room. Mrs. Pumpernickel will show you to your table. Mrs. Pumpernickel appeared as if by magic, now wearing an elegant black dress that Lucy had never seen before, and carrying Precious like a sophisticated accessory. Good evening, Mr. Goldwater. I am the dining room manager. May I present our distinguished greeter, Precious, and show you to our finest table? To Lucy's amazement, Mr. Goldwater seemed charmed rather than confused by the introduction of a poodle as the restaurant's greeter. How delightfully unconventional, he murmured, making a note in a small book. As they settled at their table, the gentle sounds of Theo's bird recordings began to play softly in the background. Mr. Goldwater tilted his head, listening appreciatively. Authentic local bird calls, very atmospheric. It adds to the sense of place. Lucy caught Theo's eye and gave him a subtle thumbs up. He responded with what she hoped was a discreet victory gesture, but which looked suspiciously like he was imitating a crane. Emma appeared with menus that Mrs. Pumpernickel had hastily created using hotel stationery and her surprisingly elegant handwriting. Good evening, Emma said, with professional confidence that Lucy admired. I'm Emma, your chef this evening. Our menu features locally inspired dishes using the freshest coastal ingredients. Mr. Goldwater studied the menu with intense concentration. Fascinating. Garden-to-table coastal chowder with heritage vegetables. Artisanal bread rolls with sea-salted butter. Coastal meadow salad with edible flowers. This is exactly the kind of authentic, place-based cuisine I was hoping to discover. Lucy felt a mixture of relief and terror. Emma had somehow made their desperate improvisation sound like a sophisticated culinary philosophy. We'll start with the chowder, if you please, Mr. Goldwater said. And perhaps you could tell me about your culinary background, chef. Emma didn't miss a beat. I believe in letting the local ingredients speak for themselves. Our approach is to honor the natural flavors of the coastal environment while respecting traditional preparation methods. Lucy had to suppress a smile. Emma was describing their complete lack of fancy ingredients and equipment as if it were a deliberate artistic choice. As the evening progressed, everything seemed to be going remarkably well. The other guests were clearly enjoying the atmosphere, with Mr. and Mrs. Chen declaring it the most romantic dinner they'd had in years. Jake Morrison was taking notes enthusiastically, already planning his blog post about the hidden gem he'd discovered. Then disaster struck in the form of Precious. The poodle had been behaving perfectly all evening, sitting elegantly by the window and occasionally posing for photos with delighted guests. But just as Emma was serving Mr. Goldwater his main course, a real seagull landed on the windowsill outside, apparently attracted by the smell of food. Precious took one look at this intruder in her territory and let out a series of barks that would have impressed a much larger dog. She launched herself from her cushion and began racing around the dining room, yapping indignantly at the window. The seagull, apparently unimpressed by this display, began squawking back just as loudly. Theo, in an apparent attempt to calm the situation, began making what he claimed were soothing gull sounds through his equipment, which only seemed to attract more seagulls to the window. Within minutes, the elegant dining room had become a cacophony of barking, squawking, and what sounded like a rejected audition tape for a nature documentary. Mrs. Pumpernickel was chasing Precious around the tables, calling, "Darling, please, remember your training," while other guests ducked and covered their plates. Mr. Goldwater sat in the middle of this chaos, calmly taking notes, while his assistant looked around in bewilderment. Lucy stood frozen for a moment, watching her carefully planned evening dissolve into complete pandemonium. Then something unexpected happened. Mr. Goldwater began to laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but genuine, delighted laughter that filled the room, even above the noise of birds and barking. "This is absolutely wonderful," he called out to Lucy. "In 30 years of restaurant reviewing, I have never experienced anything quite like this. It's completely authentic. Real life happening in real time. No pretension, no artificial atmosphere, just pure, unscripted hospitality." He stood up and applauded as Mrs. Pumpernickel finally caught Precious, and Theo managed to shoo the seagulls away from the window. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Goldwater announced to the room, "this is what dining should be about: community, spontaneity, and the unexpected joy of sharing a meal with interesting people in a place where anything can happen." The other guests began applauding too, and soon the entire room was filled with laughter and cheers. Emma appeared at Lucy's side, looking stunned. "I think we just accidentally created the most memorable dining experience of his career." Mrs. Pumpernickel, now holding a much calmer Precious, beamed with pride. "I told you Precious was an excellent greeter. She simply wanted to make sure our outdoor guests knew they were welcome too." Theo was carefully packing up his equipment, grinning sheepishly. "I may have gotten a bit carried away with the authentic soundscape concept." As the evening wound down, Mr. Goldwater approached Lucy at the reception desk. "Ms. Martinez, I want to thank you for one of the most genuinely entertaining evenings I've had in years. Your restaurant, and I use that term with great appreciation for what you've created here, represents something very special. Mr. Goldwater, I should probably explain, Lucy began, but he held up a hand. No explanations necessary. What you have here is authentic hospitality at its finest. Yes, it's unconventional. Yes, it's unpredictable. But it's also completely genuine, and that's rarer than you might think in the hospitality industry. He handed her his business card. I'll be writing a very positive review, and I'll be recommending the Seabreeze Inn to several of my colleagues. Just, perhaps, mention in your marketing that guests should expect the unexpected. After Mr. Goldwater left, Lucy collapsed into a chair in the now quiet dining room, surrounded by her unlikely team of helpers. So, she said slowly, I think we're going to need to make this restaurant thing permanent. Please. Emma nodded enthusiastically. I'd love to stay and help develop the menu. This was the most fun I've had in years. Mrs. Pumpernickel adjusted her hat thoughtfully. Precious and I were planning to extend our stay anyway. Perhaps we could work out some sort of arrangement. I do have considerable experience in hospitality management. Theo looked up from his equipment. Well, my bird research is going to take at least another month, and you have to admit, the soundscape really did add something special to the atmosphere. Lucy looked around at the transformed breakfast room, with its candlelit tables and the lingering scent of Emma's impromptu coastal cuisine. Through the window, she could see the lights of Brighton Bay twinkling in the distance. Her father arrived just as they were finishing their planning session, bursting through the door with apologies and explanations about the traffic jam. He stopped short when he saw the dining room setup and the satisfied expressions on everyone's faces. Lucy, what exactly happened here? Well, Dad, Lucy said with a grin, I think we just accidentally started a restaurant, and you're looking at our new staff. Her father looked around at Mrs. Pumpernickel and her pampered poodle, at Theo with his bird-watching equipment, and at Emma, still wearing her makeshift chef's apron. Then he looked at his daughter, who had somehow turned a potential disaster into what appeared to be a successful business venture. You know what? He said finally. I think this is going to be the most interesting summer we've ever had. As if on cue, Precious let out a small, dignified yap that sounded almost like agreement. Outside, a gentle breeze carried the real sounds of the coastal evening through the open windows. Waves lapping against the cliffs, the distant call of seabirds, and the contented murmur of guests who had experienced something truly unique. Lucy smiled as she looked around at her new, completely unconventional family of hotel staff. Tomorrow would bring new guests, new challenges, and probably new chaos. But for the first time since she'd started working at the Seabreeze Inn, she found herself looking forward to finding out what would happen next. After all, as Mr. Goldwater had said, the unexpected was exactly what made this place special. And in a world full of predictable hotels and ordinary restaurants, being special was definitely worth celebrating, even if it did involve a poodle, a bird photographer, and a completely made-up boyfriend named Brad. The adventure at the Seabreeze Inn was just beginning, and Lucy couldn't wait to see what tomorrow's guests would bring to their wonderfully chaotic little corner of Brighton Bay.